The first criminal indictment in the attack on America. A French Moroccan is accused tonight of conspiring with Osama bin Laden and others in a plot to murder Americans. But where's bin Laden? The hunt goes on, cave to cave in the mountains of Afghanistan. More medicine for the wounded U.S. economy. The Fed cuts interest rates again. And pausing to remember victims of the attack 3 months ago today.
This is the CBS Evening News with Dan Rather reporting from CBS News headquarters in New York.
Good evening. It's 3 months to the day since the murderous attack on America, and a U.S. grand jury has issued the first formal criminal charges in the case. Attorney General John Ashcroft calls the 30-page indictment of Zacarias Moussaoui, quote, a chronicle of evil. 23 others, including Osama bin Laden, are named as unindicted co-conspirators in a plot to kill and maim Americans. Moussaoui was actually in U.S. detention on immigration charges September 11th, a day officials believe he had planned to be aboard a hijacked jetliner. CBS's Jim Stewart has details of the investigation.
Zacarias Moussaoui has always been the mystery man of September the 11th. Was he just a bad student pilot, an illegal immigrant, or a terrorist? Now, U.S. officials say they're pretty sure he is the missing 20th hijacker, and they've backed it up with a 30-page indictment.
Moussaoui is charged with undergoing the same training, receiving the same funding, and pledging the same commitment to kill Americans as the hijackers.
Moussaoui was indicted on 6 counts, 4 of which could result in the death penalty. The indictment alleges he received money from the same sources as the hijackers, trained in Osama bin Laden-run camps in Afghanistan, and purchased the same flight tools and weapons the hijackers did in the days preceding the attack. But it is the money trail to the 33-year-old French Moroccan that is the most damning. U.S. and German authorities say this man, Ramzi Ben Al-Shib, not only passed along funds to the 19 dead hijackers, but wired $14,000 to Moussaoui as well just weeks before the attack. Moussaoui had also paid cash for his training at 2 U.S. flight schools, where he was remembered as the man more interested in learning in-flight maneuvers rather than how to take off and land.
In February of 2001, Moussaoui arrived in the United States, opened a bank account with $32,000 in cash, and immediately enrolled in a flight school.
Officials had always assumed that a 20th hijacker was out there somewhere and have gone back and forth over whether Moussaoui was that man. They also acknowledged that they'd had a keen interest in Moussaoui before September the 11th because he had been picked up on INS violations.
His activities were being investigated when September 11th occurred. Now, could we have done something else, perhaps, to avoid it in that investigation? Who can say?
That is about as close as anyone in government has ever come to admitting that there were clues about the terrorist attack that no one picked up on. But it certainly would have been a long shot. Moussaoui wasn't talking before the attack, and he isn't talking now. Dan?
Jim Stewart reporting live from Washington. The Bush administration is now expected to release sometime tomorrow a videotape of Osama bin Laden talking about the attack on America. U.S. officials say it proves that he was behind it. In Afghanistan tonight, Osama bin Laden's surviving al-Qaeda loyalists appear to have run out of options and lines of retreat. Cornered high in the Tora Bora Mountains, they face relentless air attack by U.S. jets and ground assault by Afghan tribal fighters and U.S. commandos. David Martin has tonight's overview of the war.
With opposition forces closing in on the cave and tunnel complexes of Tora Bora, the U.S. is sending between 200 and 300 commandos and intelligence officers into the mountains where Osama bin Laden's al-Qaeda fighters are making what could well be their last stand.
It is clearly a major fight. The people that are in there are fanatical in many respects.
South of Kandahar, U.S. Marines are searching for any Taliban trying to escape. So far, their only combat has been this brief firefight 5 days ago, in which they opened up on a Taliban convoy, killing 7. Kandahar was the last Taliban stronghold to fall, and now Tora Bora is the last remaining bastion of bin Laden's terrorist network.
It appears that the last effective al-Qaeda stronghold, but to be determined, but the last effective one right now is in the Tora Bora area.
The al-Qaeda fighters have lost the high ground, are surrounded, and been given 24 hours to surrender. Dozens of their leaders may already have been killed by a 15,000-pound bomb dropped after aircraft spotted vehicles arriving at a cave complex.
The desired effect was to kill al-Qaeda.
What sort of results are you aware of? What did your people on the ground see?
Dead al-Qaeda.
The U.S. will now try to determine exactly which al-Qaeda leaders, most importantly bin Laden, might have been killed, so it knows who must still be captured.
Those are people that we obviously hope to get control over and have a very deep involvement as to what their ultimate disposition might be.
But the al-Qaeda fighters have vowed to die rather than surrender. And in the Muslim world, tomorrow is known as the Night of Destiny, when warriors who die fighting for the cause are assured entry into paradise. Dan?
David Martin reporting live from the Pentagon. Much has been said in recent days about the caves where bin Laden's men have held out for so long. But tonight, for the first time, we can show you what at least some of them look like. The caves riddle the forbidden Tora Bora Mountains near Jalalabad, southeast of Kabul. CBS's Randall Pinkston is there on the front lines.
Some of Osama bin Laden's al-Qaeda forces kept their promise to fight to the death. But many who survived an overwhelming assault on Tora Bora now have two choices: surrender or death. Backed by tank fire and intense overnight U.S. airstrikes, bin Laden's die-hard fighters fled the network of caves which had been their hiding places. There's no longer a front line on Tora Bora, this commander said, because al-Qaeda is fleeing and their forces are scattered. Local military leaders were so confident they took reporters to the land they had liberated.
We're about to get our first look at one of Osama bin Laden's caves here on Tora Bora Mountain. It's right over there on that hilltop, on the side of the hill, hidden behind the trees. It's well fortified, well concealed.
This cave was used to store ammunition, lots of it. This reporter estimates more than 5,000 boxes of the types of shells used in anti-aircraft guns. The caves and this al-Qaeda command center escaped American attacks, but not this place. U.S. bombs deforested an entire area, reducing tall trees to ragged stumps. But the sound of distant gunfire and more heavy U.S. bombing tonight indicate that some of Osama's men haven't given up.
In less than 36 hours, Afghan troops have made remarkable progress seizing many of these caves. The problem is no one knows how many more caves there are or where they are. And no one knows where the al-Qaeda fighters are, whether they have retreated or merely regrouped for a counterattack. Randall Pinkston, CBS News on Tora Bora Mountain, Afghanistan.
In a CBS News New York Times poll out tonight, most Americans, 78%, say they're confident bin Laden will be captured. Most believe he should be tried by an international court or by a military court in the United States. 2 out of 3 Americans say the government should not hold secret trials. As for detaining non-citizens indefinitely or for long periods in the terror investigation, 77% say that's a good idea. About the war, the overwhelming majority of Americans, 93%, say they believe it is going well. With the war perceived as going well and the United States officially in recession now, the poll finds jobs and the economy have jumped ahead of terrorism as the #1 concern of Americans. Making one last attempt this year to perk up the economy, the Federal Reserve today cut interest rates again, this time by 1/4 point. Wall Street kept its elation in check. The Dow closed down 33 points. The NASDAQ was up about 10. CBS's Anthony Mason is on the Market Watch.
Hi, Scott. Nice to meet you. This is my business card.
How much experience you got? Another sign of economic recession.
I will take your resume.
A job fair in Seattle this month for laid-off Boeing workers.
I'm out the door after 25 years, 5 days before the holidays.
Another reason the Federal Reserve lowered interest rates again today. The Fed's 11th cut this year took rates to their lowest level in 40 years. Greenspan and company said signs of an economic turnaround were still preliminary and tentative.
It's too soon, in other words, I think, in the Fed's mind, to declare that the recession is ended.
But many economists believe the worst is behind us. One encouraging sign after collapsing earlier in the year, the index that measures consumer confidence is heading up again.
My word for it would be concerned, but not worried. I think it's going to be okay.
The consumer is really key to the future of this economy and the timing with respect to the recovery.
And you're paying cash? Consumer spending makes up 2/3 of the economy, and the Fed's rate cut campaign has been designed to make it easier for us to spend.
Come on in.
Leading to lower mortgage rates and cheaper auto loans.
There's a lot of really cheap money around, cheap financing, and cheap goods. I think people are going to take advantage of them, and there will be spending going forward.
And that's why many economists are forecasting an end to the recession early in the new year. There may still be one more rate cut in Mr. Greenspan's pocket, but if signs of a recovery do become clear, some say today's cut could turn out to be the Fed's last. Dan?
Anthony Mason, thanks. A commission handpicked by President Bush to correspond to his overall policies said today that it will send him 3 options for overhauling Social Security. All 3 would allow younger workers to set up private accounts to invest part of their Social Security taxes in stocks. 2 of the plans would cut guaranteed benefits. The commission contends higher returns on the private accounts will make up the difference. 2 of the plans raise benefits for lower income workers. The changes would not affect anyone now over 55. Full details can be found at CBS.com. Next here on the CBS Evening News. In a speech today, President Bush called the war on terrorism, quote, the military and moral necessity of our time. He told cadets at the Citadel in South Carolina that America must be protected from all forms of terrorism, including missile attack, and that, he said, requires an anti-missile so-called Star Wars shield. Several sources tell CBS News tonight that the Bush administration likely will clear the way for building such a shield on Thursday by formally announcing that the United States will withdraw from the 1972 anti-ballistic missile treaty with Russia. But ballistic missiles and Star Wars gizmos are far from the minds of American troops down in the ranks who are fighting the war from foxholes in the dusty Afghan desert. CBS's Alan Pizzey is with the largest contingent of those troops, U.S. Marines, at Camp Rhino in southern Afghanistan.
It's a long way from the squeaky clean briefing room view of the war, but it's the best view. Welcome to the world of the grunts. Most of the more than 1,300 U.S. Marines in Afghanistan live in holes in the ground, sleep in shifts, so someone is always alert, scanning the endless horizon of the desert. But conspicuous by its absence is the time-honored enlisted man's tradition of griping.
It's not fun sitting in a hole, but I like being part of it, and I like being out here, doing my part.
And the Marines know why they are here.
There's a direct hit on our home. It's not like we're going to bail out some other country, that was our house.
There are quiet moments, of course, time to catch a few rays. And the end of the day often brings a moment of sublime beauty. But the wind can be vicious and unrelenting, whipping up biting dust that penetrates everything. The haircuts they call high and tight are for more than meeting Marine regulations. Hygiene is a major issue here. Disease laid low more than 60% of the Russian troops when they occupied Afghanistan. The physical fitness Marines consider as vital as a gun means anything handy is a gym. Not a bad idea when the only thing to eat are MREs, 3,000 calories per meal. And the job keeps getting harder too. In addition to looking for Al-Qaeda and top-ranking Taliban members, the Marines have taken on a new task. From today, they are under orders to begin seizing weapons from anyone other than friendly forces. Sorting out friend from foe is no easy task, especially considering that many of these Marines haven't even reached their 21st birthday. But each day is another notch on the learning curve.
There's not a place on earth I'd rather be than here right now.
Something perhaps only a Marine could even think, never mind say. Alan Pizzey with U.S. Marines in southern Afghanistan.
The world's most popular SUV.
The Bin Laden tape. It's being called the smoking gun and final proof of his guilt. We'll bring it to you with detailed analysis tomorrow on the CBS Evening News with Dan Rather.
Secretary of State Colin Powell today closed out an 8-day foreign trip in London. Powell joined Britain's Prime Minister Tony Blair in observing the 3-month anniversary of the terrorist attacks in the United States. The two men also discussed Britain's planned leadership of a multinational UN peacekeeping mission in Afghanistan. The observance Powell and Blair attended was just one of many around the world and across America in memory of those who were murdered September 11th.
We remember the perfect blueness of the sky that Tuesday morning. Every one of the innocents who died on September the 11th was the most important person on earth to somebody. Every death extinguished a world.
Three months ago today, at this hour, in this place, some 184 people died. They died because they were Americans, sons and daughters of the land of liberty.
We gather this morning on this hallowed ground, made holy by the women, men, and children who lost their lives in this place. We honor them as heroes.
In a moment, Eye on America takes you to Ground Zero and the search for a permanent memorial to the Americans and others who died there.
At work.
President Bush and Americans the world over have vowed that this country will never forget the thousands who were massacred in the attack on America. But how should they be remembered and honored? The innocent victims, the heroes who died trying to save them. In tonight's Eye on America, CBS's Lee Cowan looks at the debate over the shape of a permanent memorial in New York.
Near Ground Zero these days, the streets seem almost sacred. From fences and lampposts, victims stare out at passers-by.
It's very sad. I used to work here, so I know it well.
Just gotta hook this on.
Their memorials are growing, even as the site is shrinking, beam by beam, body by body.
As the 3-month anniversary comes and goes, ideas about more permanent memorials are popping up just about everywhere. But so is the apprehension of victims' families, who fear a process out of control.
We will not tolerate building something other than a memorial on that location.
But what kind of memorial could possibly represent all this?
Good Lord.
Ed Linenthal followed the process of remembering the victims in Oklahoma City. Getting the final memorial there was a bitter journey, and this is sure to be worse.
To my mind, an agonizing event calls for an agonizing process. I mean, it would be wrong if this could be done easily.
And architects aren't fooling themselves.
This kind of an act, no one can even imagine how a single memorial could satisfy that.
Which is why there are so many ideas.
Layers of bark, let's imagine.
From virtual towers of light to unique-looking buildings to what might go on top of buildings.
I was thinking not so much about the land, but the sky.
The sky is the backdrop in Ken Smith's vision. Missing posters etched in glass, high atop a new tower. Other artists like Mary Miss
This is one of the elements.
Want to turn police barricades into memorials, at least temporarily.
The difficulty is to say we'll wait 5 years and then express our grief. I don't think you can put it off that long.
Even 30-ton pieces of debris are being saved from the scrap heap, just in case they're erected again.
What is really important about a future memorial is that it doesn't bring closure, that it keeps reviving and makes you reevaluate that event in your own personal way.
3 months and the tears still come. Forgetting isn't the problem. It's how best to remember. In New York, this is Lee Cowan for Eye